Under the pale light of dawn, the old American plains stirred to life. A soft wind carried dust and the faint scent of wild sage across the sleepy village that sat at the edge of the valley. Wooden fences creaked, horses snorted, and a few thin trails of chimney smoke curled into the sky. The hills beyond were quiet, too quiet for anyone who knew how the land usually breathed. Somewhere among those stones and dry shrubs, a cry for help broke the silence. It wasn't loud, but it carried far, trembling like a desperate prayer swallowed by the wind. He heard it while saddling his horse. The cowboy froze, his weathered hand tightening on the reins. For years he had grown used to silence, the kind that only men who've lost too much can bear. But that cry cut through him like a memory he didn't want to feel again. It came again, softer this time, a voice full of fear and pain. He swung into the saddle without thinking, his boots striking the stirrups with purpose. The morning sun barely touched the rocks as he rode toward the sound, his shadow long across the broken ground. The plains opened before him, a land of dust and ghostly echoes. The wind brushed his hat, and every step of his horse crunched against the stones. Then he saw her. She was trapped, her leg caught between two slabs of rock near the old creek bed that had long run dry. The woman was pale with fear, her skirt torn at the hem, her hands trembling as she tried to free herself. The cowboy pulled the horse to a stop, his eyes scanning the ground around her. This part of the valley wasn't safe. Loose stones could slide, and worse, wolves had been seen prowling near the ridge. "Stay still," he said, his voice low but steady. She looked up, her eyes full of tears and dust. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My leg. It's stuck. I tried moving the stones, but it's no use." He dismounted and crouched beside her, studying the trap. The rocks had shifted from a small landslide, pinning her foot deep. Her shoe was torn, blood staining the fabric. The cowboy's hands worked carefully, prying at the smaller stones first. His palms were rough, his movements deliberate. The woman winced but didn't cry out again. "Were you alone out here?" he asked without looking up. She nodded weakly. "I came searching for wildflowers for my mother's grave." Then the ground slipped. The cowboy paused, his gaze softening for just a heartbeat. He understood that kind of devotion, love tied to loss. "You're lucky I heard you," he murmured. "This land doesn't forgive carelessness." A nervous laugh escaped her lips, half sob, half relief. "I thought no one would come. I prayed someone would hear." He pushed harder at the stone, gritting his teeth as it began to shift. Dust filled the air, catching in the sun. When the rock finally gave, her leg came free, but she gasped in pain. He caught her before she fell, holding her up as she trembled. The skin beneath her torn dress was bruised and swollen. "You can't walk like this," he said. "We'll have to get you back to the village." She hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. "It's a long way. You'll have to leave me if I slow you down." He shook his head. "That's not how I was raised." For a moment, the world stood still. The plains stretched around them like an endless sea of gold and shadow. Then a distant howl rose on the wind. The cowboy's jaw tightened. "Wolves," he muttered. He lifted her into his arms, her weight light but trembling. She clung to his coat, shivering despite the morning heat. The horse stirred uneasily, sensing the danger. He placed her on the saddle, steadying her before mounting behind. As the horse began to move, she glanced back toward the ridge where the howls had come from. Dark shapes were moving between the stones, quick and silent. "They're following us," she whispered. "I know," he said quietly. "Hold on." The horse galloped hard, hooves striking sparks from the dry earth. The plains blurred as wind whipped their faces. Behind them, the wolves kept pace, darting between the rocks. The woman gripped his arm tightly, her breath ragged. "You won't let them get us, will you?" she asked, voice shaking. He didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed forward, fixed on the distant hills where safety lay. But the truth weighed heavy. He wasn't sure they'd make it before nightfall. The land was vast, and the wolves were hungry. Hours passed like ghosts drifting across the prairie. The sun climbed high, baking the earth beneath them. The woman's strength began to fade, her voice barely a whisper. He slowed the horse and stopped near an old cabin half buried by time. It was one of the last remnants of the mining days, its wood gray and broken but still standing. "We'll rest here," he said, helping her down. The cabin was dark inside, smelling of dust and old wood. He found a blanket among the debris and wrapped it around her shoulders. She sat by the window, the light painting her face soft and weary. Her leg throbbed with every heartbeat, but she forced a smile. "You saved me," she said quietly. He shook his head. "Not yet. The wolves won't stop till dark." Her eyes widened, then were trapped. He looked out at the horizon. The sun was sinking, and the sky had turned a deep amber. Shadows stretched long across the land. The wolves were still out there. He could sense them watching. "I'll keep them off," he said, checking the rifle he'd carried since the war. She reached for his arm. "Why would you risk your life for a stranger?" He turned to her, his face unreadable. "Because once, someone did the same for me." For a while, neither spoke. The air between them grew heavy with unspoken things. Fear, gratitude, maybe something more fragile. She looked down, her voice trembling. "If we don't make it through the night, I want you to know I'm thankful, more than I can say." "You'll live to say it," he said firmly. But outside, the first wolf appeared, its silhouette framed against the dying light. Then another, and another. They circled the cabin, eyes glinting like coals. The cowboy stood by the door, rifle in hand, every muscle taut. Inside, the woman prayed softly, her voice barely a whisper. The wind pushed through the cracks, carrying the scent of rain and danger. When the first growl came, it was deep and close. The cowboy's finger tightened on the trigger. He fired once, the sound echoing through the valley. The wolves scattered but didn't leave. The night had only begun, and so had their trial. The woman crawled closer to the fire he'd built, her leg trembling with pain. She looked up at him, her voice breaking between fear and desperation. "If we make it through this, I'll never forget what you did. I'll do anything you ask, cowboy, anything you want." He turned toward her, the firelight catching the shadow of his worn face. "Don't make promises you might regret," he said softly. But outside, another howl rose, closer than before. The wind rattled the door. The horse neighed in panic. He chambered another round, his eyes steady on the darkness beyond, and as the wolves closed in, the night grew colder, the tension thicker than the smoke curling from the dying fire. She whispered one last plea, her voice trembling in the quiet. "My leg is stuck in the stones, cowboy. Please save me again." The sound of her words lingered in the cabin like a heartbeat waiting to stop. The cowboy looked back once, the flicker of fear and resolve crossing his face. Then the door shuddered under the weight of what waited. Outside, the story of what happened next would not be told easily because not everyone who faces the wild lives to speak of. The fire cracked softly inside the old cabin, the smell of burning pine mixing with the scent of fear that hung in the air. Outside, the wind groaned against the wooden walls, carrying faint sounds that made the woman's heart tremble. The cowboy stood near the door, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on the shadows slipping between the rocks. The wolves were still out there. He could feel their hunger in the night, the same kind of hunger this land had for weakness. The firelight threw his shadow long across the floor, his hat low, jaw set like stone. She sat wrapped in the blanket, staring at her swollen leg. It hurt bad, but what frightened her most wasn't the pain. It was the sound of those growls circling closer every few minutes. Her throat was dry, her pulse uneven. She had never been this far from the village alone, and now she wished she'd never wandered so far. But then she looked at him, the man who had come when no one else would, and something inside her steadied. There was something about the way he moved, quiet but certain, that made her believe he'd seen darker nights than this. "How long have you lived around here?" she asked softly, trying to distract herself from the fear creeping in. He didn't turn. "Long enough to know this land don't care much who lives or dies on it." There was a weight in his voice that made her curious. She watched him reload, his hands sure and calm, as though he'd done it 1,000 times before. "You've seen things," she said. "Too many," he replied. "The war left its mark. Came back to nothing but dust and a grave I couldn't visit." She hesitated, unsure if she should ask more, but silence felt heavier than words. Was it your wife? He nodded slowly, eyes still on the dark window. She was sick when I left. I thought I'd come back with something worth giving her. Instead, I brought home ghosts. The woman lowered her gaze. The fire popped and a spark leapt up before fading. I'm sorry, she whispered. He didn't answer, just gave a small nod, as if her words had reached him but he didn't know what to do with them. Outside, another growl rolled through the wind. He tightened his grip on the rifle and looked toward the shuttered window. They're getting bolder, he said quietly. They can smell fear. Don't let them hear it. She swallowed hard, clutching the blanket. I'm trying. Good. You're stronger than you think. For a long time, neither spoke. The sound of claws scratching faintly against the wall made her flinch. The cowboy moved closer to the door, peering through a crack in the wood. The moonlight revealed movement. 3, maybe 4 wolves circling the cabin like shadows with teeth. His mind raced, measuring how long the firewood would last, how much ammunition he had left. It wasn't much. He turned back toward her. If they don't leave by sunrise, we'll have to ride through them. Her eyes widened. Ride through them? They'll tear us apart. He met her gaze, calm but cold. If we stay, they'll starve us out. The horse won't last long tied outside. She closed her eyes, her breath shaky. I thought when you pulled me from those rocks that was the worst of it. But this... He crouched beside her, his voice lower now, almost gentle. This is the West. Out here, peace don't last long. You hold on to the ones who try to keep it. She stared at him, the fire reflecting in her eyes. What about you? Who keeps peace for you? He didn't answer, but she saw something flicker across his face. Loneliness. Maybe regret. Hours passed like years. The fire dimmed, the air grew colder, and the wolves began to howl again, their voices blending into a single haunting cry. It echoed through the valley and made her skin crawl. The cowboy stood tall by the door, waiting, listening. He could tell they were testing him, she whispered. Do you think anyone from the village might come looking? He shook his head. Not out here. Folks in town stopped looking for trouble a long time ago. What if we don't make it back? He glanced at her, his voice calm but firm. We will. She wanted to believe him. Something about the way he said it made her heart ache with trust she didn't know she could feel. Maybe it was the quiet strength in his voice, or maybe it was just the firelight making her imagine things she shouldn't. When dawn began to lighten the sky, the wolves retreated to the shadows. The cowboy opened the door slowly, the cold air hitting his face. The land looked different now, gray, still, and endless. He walked out carefully, rifle raised, scanning the ridges. No sign of movement, but he knew they were still there, waiting. He saddled the horse while she watched from the doorway, her legs still weak. You think we can make it? She asked. We'll try, he said simply. Once we get past the creek bed, they'll stop following, she frowned. Why? Because beyond that, the land belongs to someone else. Her brows furrowed. Someone else? He didn't answer right away. He checked the rifle again, his jaw tightening. Old rancher. He's got men patrolling his land. They don't take kindly to strangers. Then we'll be in danger there too. He looked at her, his eyes shadowed. Better to face men than wolves, she bit her lip, knowing he was right. Still, a quiet unease filled her. Something in his tone suggested that this rancher was not a friend. They set off as the sun broke the horizon, painting the valley in pale gold. The wind was softer now, carrying the scent of earth and rain. She held on to him tightly, her leg aching with every movement of the horse. He rode slow, careful not to jostle her too much. As they rode, she noticed how the land changed. The grass grew sparse, the stones darker, the sky heavier. You said this land belongs to someone, she murmured. Who is he? He hesitated. Used to be my boss. Used to be? He blamed me for something I didn't do. A fire that took his cattle and nearly his barn. Said I ran when it started. Truth is, I stayed and pulled one of his men out before the roof fell. But he never cared much for truth. She looked at him, her heart tightening. You lost everything, he nodded. Everything but this horse and my word. The road ahead narrowed between 2 rocky cliffs. The air grew colder. He slowed the horse, scanning the ridges above. Stay quiet, he whispered. If they see us, they'll shoot first. She nodded, clutching his coat. Every sound made her tense, the flap of a bird's wings, the roll of a loose stone. Her mind ran wild with fear. But he stayed calm, his eyes sharp and focused. They passed under the cliffs, the sound of the horse's hooves echoing off the rock. Then a gunshot rang out. The bullet struck the dirt near the horse's legs. The animal reared, nearly throwing them both. Down, he shouted. leaping from the saddle and pulling her behind a boulder. Another shot whistled past. He raised his rifle but didn't fire yet. His voice was low, controlled. "They're warning us." She clung to him, trembling. "What do we do?" "Wait," he whispered. Voices echoed from the ridge above. Harsh, commanding, full of anger. "You're trespassing, cowboy. You know what happens to thieves on this land." He closed his eyes for a second, then called back. "Ain't stealing, just passing through. Got someone hurt here." Laughter drifted down from above, cruel and cold. "You always got an excuse, don't you? Boss ain't gonna like seeing you again." She looked at him, frightened. "Who are they?" "His men," he said grimly. "They'll take us in, or worse." Before he could plan the next move, a rock slide broke loose near the ridge, scattering dust and stone. The horse bolted, running back down the trail. The men shouted, and the sound of hooves thundered above. He turned to her. "We have to move." Her leg throbbed painfully. "I can't run." He met her eyes, determination hard as steel. "Then I'll carry you." She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "They'll catch us." He knelt beside her, his voice rough but steady. "Not if I can help it." She stared at him, her heart pounding. "Why are you doing this?" "You don't even know me." He looked at her with something like sorrow. "Because once I couldn't save the one who mattered. I won't fail again." Before she could speak, he lifted her into his arms and started toward the ravine. The sound of riders grew closer, the clatter of hooves echoing through the valley. Dust rose behind them like smoke. She buried her face against his chest, whispering through her tears. "If they catch us." "They won't," he said, his breath ragged as he climbed over the rocks. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the land. Behind them, voices shouted orders, and the distant howl of wolves carried faintly on the wind. They weren't safe from men. They weren't safe from beasts, and the line between both felt thinner with every step. As the cowboy disappeared with her into the canyons beyond, the air fell still again, empty, waiting. The story of what would happen in those hills hadn't been written yet, but the land was listening, and somewhere deep within it, the wolves began to howl once more. The canyon was quiet except for the sound of his boots scraping over rock and the faint rasp of her breathing against his chest. The cowboy's arms ached from carrying her, but he didn't slow down. Behind them, the echo of hooves faded into the distance, though he knew the men hadn't given up. Men like that never did. The canyon walls rose steep and close, their shadows cutting the light into slivers. Somewhere above, a hawk screamed, a lonely, cutting sound that made the woman shiver. He found a narrow opening between two cliffs and slipped through, crouching low. It led into a dry gully hidden by thick brush. There, he set her down gently against the side of a rock. She winced as her leg brushed the ground, but she bit her lip and said nothing. He looked back the way they came, his eyes scanning every ridge, every shifting shadow. "They'll be coming down this way soon," he said. "We've got a few minutes, maybe less." Her voice trembled. "Who are they?" He exhaled slowly. "Ranchers' men, hired guns. They run these parts now, call it law, but it's just power. He don't like seeing anyone he thinks crossed him." She frowned, confusion and fear mixing on her dirt-streaked face. "What did you do?" He looked away, his jaw tightening. "Didn't do what he accused me of. Fire broke out in his barn years ago. Killed half his herd. He blamed me because I was the last one in there. Said I was drunk, careless. Truth is, I ran in to save one of his boys. Got burned for my trouble. But truth doesn't matter much when a man like him decides you're guilty." Her gaze softened, and she reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she touched his sleeve. "You could have left me there too. But you didn't." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Guess I've got a bad habit of running toward trouble." She tried to smile, but her eyes betrayed her worry. "They'll kill us if they find us." He nodded. "That's why they won't." He moved quickly, gathering dead brush and pulling it over the entrance of the gully. The air was dry, the smell of dust thick. Above, a vulture circled lazily, waiting for the day to claim what the night couldn't finish. She watched him move with silent precision, like a man who had lived too long on the edge of danger. As he worked, she whispered, "You could leave me here. Go find help. They'd never know I was with you." He stopped, turning toward her. "You think I could walk away after everything? Not how I'm built. You'll die for it." Then I'll die doing something worth dying for." The honesty in his words left her speechless. She didn't know what kind of man he was, outlaw, soldier, wanderer, but she knew he carried more than just the weight of her safety. There was a heaviness in his eyes, something that came from years of running from the same kind of night that surrounded them now. As the day grew older, the sun burned high above the canyon, the heat pressing down on them like a living thing. She dozed briefly, her body exhausted. The cowboy sat beside her, silent, his hat pulled low. Every sound made him tense, the rustle of dry grass, the flap of a bird's wing. He couldn't rest, not while they were being hunted. By mid-afternoon, voices drifted faintly through the canyon. He froze. The rancher's men were near. He motioned for her to stay still, his finger to his lips. The sound grew louder. Laughter, the clinking of spurs, the scrape of boots against stone. 2 riders appeared above the gully, their shadows crossing the narrow opening. "You sure he came this way?" one voice said. "Tracks lead straight here," the other replied. "We find him. The boss said to bring him back alive. But if he fights, it's his grave we'll dig." They lingered for a moment, scanning the ground below. The woman held her breath, her heart pounding so loud she feared they could hear it. The cowboy stayed still as stone, hand on his rifle. Finally, one of the men spat into the dirt. "Let's check the creek bed. If he's smart, he'll head north." Their voices faded. The sound of hooves grew faint again until silence returned. The cowboy didn't move for a long time. When he finally exhaled, the sound was sharp and heavy. "They'll circle back," he said quietly. "We need to move when the sun drops." She looked at her leg. "I don't think I can walk far." "I'll get you through it," he said simply. The sun sank behind the cliffs, bleeding red light across the rocks. As darkness spread, the desert began to change. The heat left, replaced by the chill of evening. Coyotes yipped in the distance, answering one another in long, mournful cries. He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as they began to move. Each step was a struggle, but she refused to complain. The ground was uneven, and shadows made it hard to tell where solid earth ended and danger began. As they walked, she said quietly, "You said you saved one of his boys. What happened to him?" The cowboy's face hardened. "He died a week later, smoke in his lungs. The old man never forgave me for living when his son didn't. That's not your fault." He gave a small, sad smile. "Maybe not, but blame's easier to carry than grief." They moved through the narrow gorge, the stars beginning to show overhead. The silence between them grew heavier, filled with things neither could say. When they finally stopped to rest, he built a small fire hidden behind a boulder. The light flickered weakly, painting their faces in gold and shadow. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the flame. "What'll you do when we make it back to the village?" He poked the fire with a stick. "If we make it back, I'll keep moving. Men like me don't stay anywhere long." "Maybe you could," he shook his head. "Not in a place where my past follows like a storm." She hesitated. "And me?" He looked at her for a moment, his eyes softer now. "You go home. Live your life. Forget this." Her lips trembled. "You think I could forget the man who saved me twice?" Before he could answer, a faint rustle came from the darkness. The cowboy's hand went to his rifle instantly. The sound grew louder. A cautious step, then another. The firelight flickered as a shadow moved near the rocks. He rose to his feet, steady but alert. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The shape came closer, a man's outline, gun in hand. The cowboy raised his rifle. "Step into the light." The figure froze. For a long moment, the canyon held its breath. Then the voice came, gruff and low. "Easy, cowboy. Didn't mean to spook you." The cowboy's eyes narrowed. "You followed me all this way, didn't you?" The man stepped forward, a stranger, face rough with stubble, hat low over his eyes. "Been looking for you since morning. The old rancher put a price on your head," the woman gasped softly. "A bounty." The man nodded. "Dead or alive. More if she's with you." The cowboy didn't flinch. "You planning to collect it?" The stranger's hand hovered near his holster. "Depends on how you play this." The air between them tightened, thick with tension. The fire crackled once, breaking the silence. Then, the cowboy spoke. "You don't have to do this. That bounty won't buy you peace. I've seen what chasing money does to a man." The stranger's eyes flickered. "Peace don't feed a man's children. Neither does blood," the cowboy said quietly. For a long moment neither moved. Then slowly the stranger lowered his gun. "There's a cave up north," he said. "Water, shelter. You'll be safe there for the night. But come morning you'd better be gone." "I can't cover your trail forever?" The cowboy studied him, suspicion still in his eyes. "Why help me?" The stranger gave a tired shrug. "Once upon a time I worked for the same man. Saw what he did to folks who got in his way. You ain't the villain in this story." Before either could thank him, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving them alone again under the cold stars. The woman looked at the cowboy. "Can we trust him?" He stared into the darkness where the stranger had gone. "Doesn't matter. We don't have a choice." They followed his directions north, the night deep around them. The air grew damp, and the faint trickle of water reached their ears. At last they found the cave, a narrow opening half hidden behind brush. Inside it was cool and dark, the sound of dripping water echoing softly. He helped her sit near the entrance, lighting a small flame to push the darkness back. She leaned against the wall, her eyes half closed with exhaustion. "Do you ever get tired of running?" she asked softly. He looked out toward the stars. "Every day. Then why keep doing it?" He turned to her, his voice low and rough. "Because stopping means facing what I lost." She reached out, her hand brushing his. "Maybe facing it is the only way to stop being haunted." He didn't pull away, but he didn't answer either. Outside, the wind howled faintly through the canyon, carrying the smell of rain. Somewhere far off, the sound of riders echoed once more. The cowboy looked toward the darkness, his eyes narrowing. "They're still coming," he murmured. And as thunder rolled across the sky, the first drops of rain began to fall, cold, heavy, and filled with the promise that the worst was yet to come. The rain came harder as the night deepened, turning the canyon floor into slick, dark mud. The cowboy sat near the cave entrance, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the narrow path that led down through the rocks. Every drop of water that hit the ground sounded louder than it should have, and each gust of wind brought with it the illusion of footsteps. The woman sat a few feet behind him, clutching the blanket tight around her shoulders. Her legs still throbbed and exhaustion weighed on her, but her mind wouldn't rest. "The storm outside wasn't the only one raging. Do you think they'll find us?" she asked softly. He didn't turn around. "If they're still riding, the rain'll slow 'em down. But men like that don't stop. Not till they've got what they came for," she shivered. "And what did they come for?" He hesitated before answering. "Me, and maybe now you," she bit her lip. "They don't even know who I am." "They don't need to," he said. "You were with me. That's enough." The words hung between them, heavy and sharp. She looked toward the small fire he'd built again, its light flickering weakly in the damp air. He seemed carved from shadow, broad shoulders, face lined with stories he never told, eyes that had seen too much. She wondered what kind of life he'd led before all this. What had made him so quiet, so certain, and so lonely? After a while, he spoke again, voice low. "When I worked that ranch, I thought it was the only place I belonged. I fixed fences, broke horses, did my share of dirty work. But loyalty don't mean much when power's involved. The old man ran his land like a kingdom. People feared him more than they respected him. And I didn't bend the knee as low as he liked." She watched him, her heart tightening. "He punished you for that?" He nodded. "He said a man who won't bow is a man who'll betray. So when the fire started, it was easy for him to point at me." "But you saved his son," she said. He stared at the rain beyond the cave. "Doesn't matter." In his eyes, I was already guilty. And when his boy died, there wasn't enough truth in the world to change that. Thunder rolled above them. The woman flinched at the sound, and he glanced back at her. "Try to sleep," he said softly. "You'll need your strength." But she couldn't. Every flash of lightning lit the canyon like daylight, and every rumble seemed to shake her bones. She wanted to trust him, wanted to believe he could get them out alive, but the fear was too real. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, whispering, "You said the wolves would stop at the creek, but what if they're still following too?" He looked toward the mouth of the cave, the rain blurring the view beyond. "If they are," he said quietly, "then we're trapped between two hunts." The thought sent a chill through her that no blanket could warm. Hours passed. the storm easing only slightly. The cowboy stayed awake, watching, waiting. Somewhere in the dark distance, a faint light flickered. He stiffened, lowering his hand to the rifle. Another flash, then gone. He knew what it meant. Lanterns. The men were still tracking them. He turned to her and whispered, "They've found the trail." Her eyes widened. Now he nodded. "We can't stay. Not till morning. But where can we go?" He glanced deeper into the cave. "There's a back path. I saw it earlier. A narrow gap that leads into the upper ridge. Hard climb, but it'll hide our tracks." She hesitated, fear and pain fighting in her eyes. "I can't walk on this leg." "Then I'll carry you again." She shook her head. "You'll be too slow." He met her gaze, firm but calm. "I don't leave people behind." Before she could argue, he knelt and lifted her carefully into his arms. She clung to him, heart pounding as he stepped into the darkness of the cave. The small fire died behind them, swallowed by shadow. The deeper they went, the narrower the passage became. The air was cold, damp, filled with the drip of unseen water. He moved quietly, his boots scraping against the slick stone. Every sound felt too loud. Behind them, faint echoes, voices, horses, the sharp crack of rocks underfoot. "They're close," she whispered. "I know." They reached a steep wall, where the cave split into two paths. One led upward through a narrow crack, the other down into the earth. He studied both for a moment, listening to the echoes. The voices came from below. He shifted her weight and said, "Up we go." She nodded weakly, her fingers clutching his coat. The climb was slow and painful. Rocks crumbled under his boots, and more than once his grip slipped. But he kept going, muscles straining, breath steady. Her heart hammered against his chest, every inch upward feeling like borrowed time. Then came a shout from below. Angry. Clear. Too close. A gunshot cracked through the cave. The bullet sparked against the stone near their feet. She gasped. He didn't stop. He pushed harder, pulling them over the edge of the narrow gap and into a smaller tunnel above. He set her down and crouched low, listening. The men were yelling now, the sound of boots echoing up the walls. He could hear them splitting off, some going lower, some climbing after them. He reloaded quietly. "We're running out of time." She touched his arm. "How many?" "Too many." "Then maybe you should leave me. They want you, not me." He turned, eyes burning in the dim light. "You think they'll spare you once they see you helped me?" Her lips trembled. "Then what do we do?" He looked toward the far end of the tunnel, where faint light hinted at another opening. "We reach the ridge. If we can get to the high ground before they do, we've got a chance." They moved again, crawling through the narrow passage until they reached the end. The opening looked out over the canyon below, steep, jagged, and dangerous. The rain had stopped, but the ground was slick and treacherous. He helped her out carefully, then scanned the horizon. In the distance, faint torches moved like restless stars. They were still being hunted. The wind howled across the ridge, cold and sharp. The woman's hair whipped across her face as she clung to him. "We can't outrun them forever," she whispered. "I know," he said quietly. "But we can outthink them." They began moving along the ridge, keeping low. Every few steps he stopped to listen. The torches below grew brighter, the sound of shouts rising. The men had found the lower trail, then another sound. A low growl. The woman froze. "Was that—" "Yes," he said grimly. "Wolves." From the shadows near the rocks, yellow eyes glinted. 3 of them stepped into the open, their fur slick with rain, teeth bared. The cowboy aimed the rifle slowly, but before he could fire, a gunshot rang out from below. The wolves scattered, vanishing into the dark. "Damn," he muttered. "They heard that." The woman clung to his arm. "They're coming this way." He looked toward a narrow ledge ahead. "We move now." The climb grew steeper, the ledge narrowing until every step was a gamble. The wind pushed hard, threatening to knock them off balance. He moved first, helping her along, his hand gripping hers tightly. Voices echoed behind them again. Closer, clearer. "There, up there!" Bullets whistled through the air, striking the rock. He pushed her down behind a boulder, returning fire. The sound thundered across the canyon. She covered her ears, trembling as dust and stone rained down. He reloaded fast, firing again. One of the torches below fell, rolling into the mud, but more men were coming, their shouts filling the night. He turned to her, breathing hard. "We can't stay here. Where do we go?" He looked to the far side of the ridge, where the land dipped into a narrow valley. "There's a river down there. If we reach it, the water will hide our scent." She nodded, tears mixing with rain and dirt. "Then let's go." He grabbed her hand and they ran, stumbling, sliding, half falling down the rocky slope. Behind them, the men shouted and fired again. The world became noise and movement, gunfire, thunder, wind, the rush of their hearts. When they finally reached the valley floor, the river glimmered ahead, black and cold. He helped her wade in, the current pulling at their legs. The water was freezing, but it was their only chance. As they crossed, torches appeared above them again, the men's voices growing closer. He turned, firing one last shot toward the ridge. Then he pushed her forward through the current, his voice rough and urgent. "Keep going. Don't stop." The river carried them deeper into the dark, the sound of pursuit fading behind. The storm had passed, but the danger hadn't. The cowboys, heart pounded with the knowledge that the next dawn would decide everything, whether they lived or whether this was where the story ended, and as the current swept them around the bend, lightning flashed once more, illuminating the ridge where the ranchers' men stood watching. They hadn't lost them, only followed them into the next hunt. The war for survival had only just begun. The river carried them until the sky began to pale and the wind grew still. The cowboy's arms were numb, his body heavy from the cold water, but he never let go of her. When the current finally slowed near a bend, he found a shallow bank and dragged them both ashore. The woman coughed weakly, her face pale, her hair plastered to her cheeks. He helped her sit up, his breath uneven, his chest burning from the effort. The world was quiet again, except for the sound of water slipping over stones and the faint call of a bird somewhere upstream. She looked at him with wide, tired eyes. "Are we safe now?" He glanced back at the river, where the mist hung low and thick. "For now, the water will hide our trail. They'll lose us for a while." Her lips trembled. "For a while?" He nodded. "They'll keep hunting till someone tells them to stop. That's the kind of men they are." She looked away, shivering under her torn shawl. "Then what do we do?" He stood slowly, his knees stiff, and looked out toward the east where the first light was touching the hills. "We head north. There's a small town a day's ride from here. If we reach it, you'll be safe. You can start again. And you?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "I'll keep moving." "You can't just keep running forever." He gave a faint, tired smile. "That's the only thing I've ever been good at." The wind moved gently through the grass as they started walking along the riverbank. The ground was soft beneath their boots, the air carrying the scent of wet earth. The woman leaned on him for balance, her legs still swollen but healing slowly. Each step hurt, but she refused to stop. They had survived too much to give up now. By midday, they reached the edge of the forest. Sunlight filtered through the tall pines, warm and golden after the long, cold night. The cowboy found a fallen tree and helped her sit. He gathered some dry twigs and started a small fire, the smoke rising in a thin gray thread. She watched him work, her eyes soft, studying the man who had risked everything for a stranger. "You never told me your name," she said quietly. He paused, the match still in his hand. "Names don't mean much out here." "They do to me," she said. He looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "They used to call me Cole," he said finally. "Cole," she repeated softly, the sound of it settling in her chest like a promise. "Thank you for saving me," he shook his head. "You don't owe me thanks. Just make it back to your people." The fire crackled, and for a long moment they sat in silence. The forest felt calm, almost peaceful, but there was something heavy in the air, the kind of quiet that comes before an ending. She stared into the flames. "You think they'll ever stop chasing you?" Cole poked the fire with a stick, watching the embers rise. "Maybe when the old man dies, or maybe when they find something worse to do. Till then, I'll keep ahead of them." "You could come with me," she said. "The village isn't much, but you'd have a place. People would see who you really are." He gave her a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You don't know what kind of man I really am." "I know you're not the kind they said you were," she replied. "You saved me when you didn't have to. You could have left me to die in those stones." He didn't answer, but his eyes softened as he looked at her. For a moment, the tension in his shoulders eased. The sunlight touched his face and she saw the years of wear fade just a little. They stayed by the river until evening, resting and drying their clothes. Then Cole stood and looked north again. "We'll make camp one more night, then move at dawn," he said. "By midday, we'll reach the town." She nodded, though something inside her ached at the thought of parting. That night, the fire burned low between them. The forest was alive with sounds, the rustle of leaves, the whisper of the river, the faint hoot of an owl. She lay awake, watching the glow fade across his face. He sat against a tree, hat tipped forward, rifle across his lap. For the first time since they met, he looked at peace. "Cole," she said softly. He stirred, lifting his head. "You should be sleeping." "I can't," she said. "Every time I close my eyes, I see the rocks, the fire, the men." He looked at her, the flicker of the fire reflecting in his eyes. "You'll stop seeing them one day. You just need time," she swallowed. "Do you ever stop seeing yours?" He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched long between them. Then he said quietly, "Some ghosts don't leave. You just learn to live with them." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. "Maybe that's what we're both doing. Just learning to live with ghosts." He looked away toward the river, where moonlight shimmered across the surface. Maybe so. The night passed without danger. When dawn came, the mist was thin and golden. They packed what little they had and began walking again. The forest opened into wide meadows, and in the distance faint smoke rose from chimneys. The sight brought a smile to her lips. Hope, fragile but real. "That's the town," Cole said quietly. "You'll find shelter there. Tell them what happened. Someone will take you in." She stopped, turning to face him. "You're not coming?" He shook his head. "I can't. My name's still worth more to the wrong kind of men. If they see me there, they'll bring trouble to everyone." She took a step closer. "Then where will you go?" He looked north where the mountains cut the sky. "Farther than I've gone before. There's open land past the ridges, places where a man can disappear." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to disappear," he smiled faintly. "It's what I do best." She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "I'll never forget you, Cole." He hesitated, then squeezed her hand back gently. "Don't remember me," he said softly. "Just live." For a moment neither moved. The morning breeze lifted her hair, and he wished he could freeze that moment. The quiet, the light, the feeling that after all the running, something good had come of it. He let go first. Turning, he adjusted his hat and started toward the hills. She stood watching him go, her heart heavy but full of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Faith. The wind carried her voice after him, soft but clear. "Goodbye, Cole." He didn't look back, but his voice drifted over his shoulder. "Keep walking till the sun's at your back." She smiled through her tears, whispering to the wind, "I will." When she finally reached the edge of the town, people came out to help her. A kind old woman took her in, wrapped her in blankets, and gave her food. They listened as she told her story. The landslide, the wolves, the man who saved her. They shook their heads in disbelief, saying it sounded like something out of a legend. But she knew it was real. Every scar, every tear, every heartbeat that carried her through the night had been real. Days passed. Her leg healed. She found work helping in the general store, her laughter slowly returning, though her eyes sometimes drifted to the hills. Every evening at sunset, she would walk to the edge of town and look north, wondering if he was still out there, riding through the wilderness, chasing freedom beneath the endless sky. One night, as the last light faded, she saw a shadow far in the distance, a lone rider moving along the ridge, the setting sun turning his figure to gold. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was just the wind playing tricks. Either way, she whispered a prayer of thanks for the man who had given her back her life. Out in the open country, Cole rode on, the land stretching before him like a promise. The world was still wild, still hard, but somewhere deep down he felt lighter than he had in years. Maybe because he'd saved someone, maybe because she'd reminded him what it meant to care. The sun sank behind him, painting the plains in red and gold. He slowed his horse and looked once over his shoulder toward the small town far behind. For the first time, he didn't feel like a man running from the past. He felt like a man moving toward something new. He tipped his hat to the horizon, the wind brushing against his face. "Reckon that's enough ghosts for one lifetime," he murmured, and with that he turned his horse toward the mountains, riding steady into the fading light. The sky stretched wide and endless above him, and for the first time in a long while the cowboy felt free.